Indeed. All right, hey there, everyone. It's Christy, and welcome to an episode of a variation of Feminist Talkback, where we're going to have a discussion from a humanist perspective. So it's sort of, I guess, humanist talkback. And before we start, I think it's worth just setting the scene, and then I'll introduce my guests with a quote from the Humanist Manifesto, because I think that this is one of the reasons that I take the position I do on a lot of human rights issues. And I'm going to read it out and then ask each of the guests to react to it and how it informs their worldview, especially with regards to trans issues. So this is the last point in the manifesto, and it reads, "We assert that humanism will affirm life rather than deny it, seek to elicit the possibilities of life, not flee from them, and endeavor to establish the conditions of a satisfactory life for all, not merely for the few." So first, I'm going to go in order of which you guys are appearing in my screen, and that's Michael, you're up first. So what are your reactions to that and the topic of trans issues and transphobia?
Man, I was hoping other people would go first so that I could I could think a bit more. I suppose I mean it kind of I said I made a video kind of recently about sex and gender, and that was kind of my main point. I suppose was this idea of trying to be more empathetic and understanding of people who are different from you, you know, and that's kind of how that quote sort of resonates with me because it's for me it's about I have as a straight cis white dude I have no idea of the experiences and you know life experiences of people who um aren't in that category, and so I feel like I need to be as open to to those experiences as explained by those people and when it comes to trans rights and things like that, there are it doesn't make sense to me to go around denying people's experiences and basically denying people's humanity by saying there are only two sexes and there are only two genders, uh, because that's just like a really like shitty thing to do to go around and basically look at an essential part of a person's identity, their gender or their sex, like a thing that probably defines a large part of them, a part of their identity, and say, well, actually, no, that doesn't exist. It's either this thing or this thing. Pick one, and stop being a prissy little snowflake. You know that to me is just like, who the hell are you to say something like that? Who the hell are you to 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 say that to people? And then when that decision kind of informs legislation and you know and people's you know people's actions when it comes to you know like I don't know medical help and things like that, that's just kind of bullshit. Yeah,
Yeah,
so from a humanist perspective, it's a pretty distressing and confusing thing for me. I mean, the other thing that was confusing, like I said in my video, is how um I'll get to that later. It doesn't matter now, but yeah, the humanist definitely uh
that's
confusing
a
for
part
me.
of it.
As,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, how can you be a humanist and hold views that are repressive to humans? So the next
yeah.
person up is Micaiah. Mick, either on that quote or humanism as a principle, how does that inform your worldview?
It's basically the whole for me brain farts. Uh, for me, it's basically everybody deserves rights regardless of who they are. It's I believe some people have posted it recently. It's nobody deserves to live in poverty. And people underneath are like, yeah, but what about this person? And it's like, let's go back to the beginning. Nobody deserves. That's kind of my view is nobody deserves to be a lesser treated as a lesser human being. And I lived the majority of my life thinking, or at least repressing what I was and thinking that I was a cisgender female. And when, and so I enjoyed certain rights, certain privileges, all that sort of stuff. I was definitely not as oppressed as a transgender person is in society. Excuse me. But when I finally came out and I started realizing just how lucky I was that I lived in a state that had non-discrimination laws already in place, where if, say, I started transitioning while at work, other states I could get fired for it, but in Oregon I couldn't. And it really started getting that kind of, wait a second, there are people out there who scream all about equality and egalitarianism and everything's equal, but yet we've got these laws in place that they're not bothering to fight, that are treating trans people, gay people, genderqueer people, basically anybody in the LGBT community, as second class citizens. And it honestly horrifies me, especially when I see it being done by people who have large followings, who have very impressionable people following them.
Good points. Thanks for that. Tim from Demotivator Opinion. Was focused on the S and was gonna make a joke, and then I messed up the regular channel name. Anyway, Tim, humanism and these issues. What are your thoughts on them, or the quote that I read out at the beginning?
Well, I think just generally on humanism, that obviously it's just a shared sense of humanity, solidarity with other people. And the thing that this makes me think of is the language, partly, of people describing things as disorders or abnormal. I think that's a non-humanistic perspective, because if you care about treating other people with dignity, you don't want to marginalize them by treating them as abhorrent freaks who are different from everyone else in society. And Makaya actually had a very interesting point about this on Facebook. I was talking to Makaya about it, where I asked why, what's the deal with the word abnormal? Like when we say trans people are, or intersex people are abnormal or abnormality or some kind of, strange occurrence. Whereas it's very easy to use neutral language where you just say it's like a variation. And I think if you normalize saying it's just a variation, then that's a humanistic perspective, because you're not saying, everything is just based on your relationship to being normal in some way, so that you're completely marginalized. And when you're trying to function in society, everyone's like, those are the different people, those are like the freaks. I think it's much better to say those people have a variation about them, and they're still humans, and they have a shared sense of humanity. And it's basically just about having compassion and not believing that, trans or intersex people are doing it for a lark, they're doing it for a laugh, they just think it's all fun and games. They've just been like, hey, I'm going to wake up one day and I'm going to say that I'm a, shellfish, ha ha ha, whatever. It's like, no, they're human beings. Amongst every group of human beings, there's going to be, a few people who are doing things for odd reasons, but they are generally the exception, not the rule. I think generally people are doing things for real reasons. And I think the humanistic perspective says that we believe that generally the reasons people do things are for, human reasons that are motivated by, who they actually are. And that's just the thing that makes me think of, like, not saying that people who are different are some kind of freakish abnormality. I think that's anti-humanist, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I would really agree with that, because from my perspective, the point of humanism is to allow for human flourishing. And that flourishing will take a variety of manifestations. I mean, that's the kind of the whole point of getting beyond religion that narrowly confines people to roles and ways of living, and give people the freedom to express who they are, explore who they are, discover who they are, and then be who they are. And so how is it at all humanist to say,
well, just on
no, you can only be human in these specific ways. These are the only ways you can be free.
I think one point that came up in response video to Michael was intersex or trans people are not needed for humans, And to me, I mean, like, homosexuals are not, like, technically needed for humanity. Like, that is not a humanistic argument. That's just an argument from If somebody doesn't have utility for other people, they're basically worthless to us.
You could say
And
the
I
same
find
about
that kind
so
of
many
repulsive.
different. Yeah, you could say the same about so many different sorts of people. I mean, you talk about asexuals who don't want to do that either. You can talk about old people who can't reproduce anymore. You can talk
Well,
about
that's
any
also
sort of.
relevant because they exist and they're alive. They
Yeah,
are
exactly.
here. So
Mm.
what's your fucking point? Just like that's to me that's reverse virtue signaling. That's like anti-virtue signaling. Hey, I'm gonna signal how I'm a douche. Like, oh great, that's fantastic. Now fuck off and stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Well, what it reminds me of are the Christian arguments against marriage equality on the premise that, well, gay couples can't reproduce, so they shouldn't be allowed to. So if you're distilling people down to their reproduction, you're denying them their humanity. You're reducing them to reproducing animals, like stock, breeding stock. And that says more about your worldview than the people you're talking about.
And then 2 seconds later, there's overpopulation. There's too many humans. It's like, well, why let gay couples adopt them then? No, because they will raise them to be perverted. It's like, I hate
So before we move on and just go over some of our topics, I'm going to put this out at the start of the show, and it comes from the World Health Organization, and it talks about the difference between sex and gender, but it really focuses on sex because I thought it was important for this discussion, especially if we're going to be talking about intersex people and everything else. Humans are born with 46 chromosomes and 23 pairs. X and Y chromosomes determine a person's sex. Most women are 46XX and most men are 46XY. Research suggests, however, that in a few births per thousand, which means in a world of billions, millions of people, Christie's note, some individuals will be born with a single sex chromosome, 45X or 45Y, sex monosomies, I think is how you pronounce it, and some with 3 or more sex chromosomes, 47XXX, 47XYY, or 47XXY. In addition, some males are born 46XX due to the translocation of a tiny section of the sex determining the region of the Y chromosomes. Similarly, some females are also born 46XY due to a mutation in the Y chromosome. Clearly, there are not only females who are XX and males who are XY, but rather there is a range of chromosome complements, hormone balances, and phenotype variations that determine sex. And there's a word here that I think is important to pick out because we know what chromosomes are, but phenotype, if you've read Dawkins, you'll know phenotype is how a gene is expressed. And I think it's incredibly reductivist to say that we have to define a person's sex based on their chromosomes and not how those genes are expressed in the person's body or how they identify. And they just have a quick line here that gender, typically described in terms of a masculinity and femininity, is a social construction that varies across different cultures and over time. So we can see from the start, if you look at the science, if you're a skeptic and you want to be led by the data, the first conclusion you have to come to is that there's not just XXXY. There's a great variety. And even in every 1,000 births is going to end up with huge variation in a population. So that little technical bit aside, I thought we would move on to the topics. Yeah, go ahead. If anyone else wants to jump in on that, please. But Michael, you go first.
Okay, so the first thing I read an article by Skepchick, and she was talking about how we define sex, and I thought one of the interesting things was the way that we figure out someone's sex is not by chromosomes or any shit like that. It's by someone's genitals. Because when you're born, a doctor looks at your genitals and goes, "You're a guy or you're a girl." That's what happens. We don't check people's chromosome sexual, biological chromosome sex, when they're first born. So you're already defined as either male or female when you're born. And if your genitals are kind of ambiguous, in some cases, people have, like genital reassignment surgery and stuff. Like their parents do that to them at birth, which I think is fucking awful. If people are abhorred by genital mutilation, they should be fucking abhorred by this as well. Like forcing someone into a certain sexual box because their genitals are a little bit ambiguous. If we talk about like genitals as a guide for whether you're part of a certain sex, there's no like one right way your genitals can be. There's a ridiculous amount of variation within those categories. But then the other thing is when we're talking about what defines a sex, like things that I read about, it's not just genitals. It's genitals. You got the chromosome thing. You got the gonads. You got the internal sexual organs. Then there's the secondary sexual organs like breasts and hair growth and things like that. A whole variety of different categories, which all have multiple variations inside them that all come together to kind of dictate what biological sex someone is. So to say this one thing and another, and then there's like kind of crossovers between those things as well. That's where intersex kind of comes in, and there's a huge variation in intersex as well. To like Christy says, it seems ridiculously reductionist to look at that and go, yep, there's only two sexes. That's just like, holy shit, what the hell is wrong with you? Kind of thing, kind of crazy thing. And there was one other thing I wanted to say in regards to that. I can't remember right now, but that's I feel that is an extremely reductionist thing to say.
Oh, I want to make a quick point on the
Sure.
people calling Michael like a creationist or some kind of faith-based argumenter, because they're like, oh, Michael is saying that because he doesn't know, it has to be more complicated or some shit. And that's exactly like creationists who are saying, well, I shouldn't do the Bering voice because he didn't argue this particular point, but I've just seen it in the comments. Like, people saying, oh, that's exactly like creationists, because when they don't know about stuff, they just say God did it. But I would say that that's a fucking absurd argument, because we know that the concept of God or the idea of God is extremely improbable and there's no evidence for it. Whereas the thing that Michael's talking about is a very complex subject which people can do a lot of research on and people can study and people can look at, and there is evidence and there's things that can be analyzed in order to see whether it's a good idea to have other gender distinctions, like Z or Zo or Zoo or whatever other kind of things, because there's intersex and there's this complex intermingling of chromosomes and different types of chronomonal, that's not a word, combinations. But they, I think it's really cheesy when you say, because someone is positing that something might be more complex or there might be more than something else, it's automatically like creationists. Because I think,
yeah, that's a stupid argument.
That's the opposite of
we have no evidence for God. We can't study God, but we can study gender and we can study sex. So I don't know where that cheesy rhetorical flourish comes in. Like, why
saying I believe, or saying I don't know, therefore God, is not the same as biology and the universe are really, really complicated, therefore it seems ridiculous to me to assert that there is only a binary in this complex biological system. Those are not the same thing.
It's almost like saying, oh, I think there's probably a cure for cancer. They'd be like, what? That's not proven. We don't know. What? That's like making up God. That's just putting God in the mix. Like, no, it's probable. It's possible that they're going to come up with a cancer cure one day. I don't think it's very probable or possible they're going to discover God. I mean, that maybe it could happen, but I don't see it as likely.
It's a stupid argument.
So they're completely different things. It's like, why don't we just
It shows a ridiculous misunderstanding of both of those arguments.
It's also like, they don't understand. Solar panels are never going to be feasible. It's like, oh, okay, then let's give up studying them and give up improving them.
But the data is already out there. I mean, the facts are out there. The stats are out there. These are not things that we don't know about. We know about chromosomal, I think that's the word you're looking for, chromosomal variations and the way that they line up. So, but before we move off this, I was going to ask Mick if he wanted to come in on, the sort of variation in nature when it comes to sex, let alone the whole idea of gender, which involves a conscious mind and conscious beings.
I've got a couple things on that. One is, you had touched on it when you were reading the thing, is that there are hormonal differences. For me, even though for all we know, my genetic makeup is XY, we don't know because I haven't had it tested. Or, I mean, XX, sorry. But the thing is that when I had my testosterone level tested, I actually had an abnormally high level of testosterone for a woman. I believe at when it was originally tested, now it's down around 70, 80, but originally it was up around 180, which is abnormally high for a woman. It shouldn't be above 100 for somebody who is a woman. So they thought that that might be what was causing my gender dysphoria. And the fact that I still have the dysphoria, even though my testosterone level has gone down, is showing that there's something more going on. But I also have a naturally deeper voice than most women. I've got much broader shoulders than a lot of women. In fact, my shoulders are the same width as my husband's, and he's 6'3". And I've got a lot of more masculine features about my body, which has led to wondering if there is something more than just, oh, it's either this chromosome set or that chromosome set. And without going in and getting genetically tested, we'll never know. But another thing that I found that was hilariously reductionist when dealing with a lot of the people in the comments section of both Michael's video and Kevin's mirror of it on gender was this whole thing of, if you look at the medical definition, if you look at this definition, if you look at that definition, and I believe somebody said that there was only one definition for intersex, and I'm sitting there going, hang on a sec. Yeah, I was like, hang on a sec, and I went to the medical dictionary, because you can actually pull up multiple ones through just one site, and there was like 15 definitions for intersex, and that included phenotypal intersex, chromosomal intersex, true intersex, hormonal intersex, and that was just a breakdown of one definition. And I was like, there's
intersex is a binary. That means there's only one.
Yeah.
I just read a thing this morning. I just read a thing this morning about intersex, and because one of the things that a lot of people are saying is intersex is so rare that it should just be discounted, or it doesn't count as a separate sex or whatever, or just ignoring the fact that it's still like a spectrum. Intersex is not just like one thing. That because people. I'm not sure exactly what Bering said on this, because I can't stand to watch his bullshit. But
I think I'm the only one that actually watched that video.
I
I
just
watched it last night just to make sure I got it.
I watched a
I
little
just
bit
got
of it,
off
but
of Suicide Watch. I'm not going to watch something.
anyway, the point was I'm not sure if he said this, but a lot of people in the comment section were saying, that it's really, really rare, and the common statistic that people say is like 1 in 2,000 people are born into sex, which is like 0.05% of the population. But I just read this thing saying about why that's wrong, because that's about a very specific subset of intersex people, which is ambiguous genitals. That's the thing I was saying. But that's not the only thing that defines what an intersex person is. And so when you account for like the broad spectrum of people that can be defined as intersex because of all the different things that define you as intersex, it gets up to something like this thing here says the most thorough research we have finds intersex people to be about 1.7% of the population, and that still might not seem like a lot, but that's the same percentage of people that are redhead in the population. So are redhead people not people either?
Yeah.
They don't have
You can talk about 3 births out of 1,000 and go, oh, well, that's not that many. But there are 7 billion people on the planet. So you have to multiply that 3 to do the math. That's a lot of people. You can't just say we should not talk about them or they don't count. Yeah. So you have to do the math all the way.
You guys didn't watch. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that's the same with transgender people, where they're like, oh, it's point something % of the population, or it's only this % of the population. And I did the math, and I was like, okay, I'm getting bigger numbers than what a lot of these sites say. Like they say 700,000 people in the U.S. are transgender, And then I dug deeper and I was like, oh, those are that openly identify and have been diagnosed. Okay. Because I was getting up in the millions of people that are transgender in the United States alone. And I'm sitting here going, oh, we're all faking it. Okay.
Yeah, you guys are trans trenders. Stop being
Oh
a trans
God, I
trender.
get told that
yeah.
constantly.
Well, that was the thing that I discovered as well is and I think is again like a ridiculously not humanistic thing is this idea of transgender, which is basically me, the non-transgender person, is better at defining who is a transgender person than actual transgender people. I am the one who looks at a transgender person and says, "You are a transgender person," or "You aren't a transgender person," and it's like, are you kidding me? Is it
Oh, because
what?
they love being
Because the
treated
definition that I read was either a transgender is a person who is just being transgender to look cool, which is like a ridiculously subjective thing, or it's someone who suffers from gender dysmorphia, which is not something that has to happen if you're a transgender person. It's just the most ridiculous thing ever.
I mean, I know people are making drama and making fucking hay out of Michael's video just to be like, no, Michael, there's only two genders. He's male, female, dude.
Michael.
But I appreciate the fact you brought up the subject because in the video that I did about depression and suicide, I wanted to highlight the fact that males have a much higher suicide rate because I was doing that video for the Against the Odds group, which is like a men's issues group. So I thought it would be important to highlight the disparity between male and female. And if you go down the list, you're like, males are like 3-4 times more likely to attempt or probably succeed. I don't know about succeed, but at least attempt at suicide. But then while I was doing the video, I was like, oh shit, you know what? I mean, I'm talking about men's issues, but I can't just ignore like trans people and this whole other, side of things. So I looked it up, and it was like 41% attempted suicide rate among trans people, and that's information that I already should have known, but that just blew me the fuck away because it's over 4 times the amount of the general populace. Over 4 times the amount of males. Trans people are trying to attempt suicide, and to me, that statistic blows away this idea of trans-trender, because anybody who is trying to be a trans-trender is going to be statistically irrelevant, and there's that statistically irrelevant word again, but actually using it properly this time, compared to the vast majority of trans people who are really struggling and really suffering and having a very difficult life and being treated like freaks, and then having people like, fucking bearing sponge pants being like, you are an abnormality, you are different, you are strange. We shouldn't, it's facts, not feels. We have to treat you like you're different. Yeah. Fuck your attempted suicide rate. Humanism, throw that shit in the garbage. Who gives a shit about you? And fuck, it's really sick.
It's the same binary that you get from fundamentalists, to be honest. So
yeah,
that's why I said the thing about Christianity, the black and white thinking at the beginning, with the ridiculous adherence to a black and white style of thinking.
41%. That statistic makes me physically ill.
Shocking.
I couldn't even look at it. I was like, oh my god.
Micaiah, do you want to comment on that? I think you had a point.
Yeah. No, the suicide thing is actually, it is a very big thing among the transgender community, and a lot of it has to do with people who go out there and they're like, oh, we're humanists, oh, we're for equality, oh, you want to be something, go away. It's
free speech, freedom of expression, except.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, I finally got my name legally changed. And I was like, yes, wonderful. I expect people to mispronounce my name from time to time, which happens. I actually got my first phone call today of somebody actually using my new legal name. And I was like, oh my God, this is wonderful. And I was like, yes, this is Micaiah. And they're like, oh, well, how are you doing, ma'am? And I'm like, I froze right there. And Harvey was standing there and he was kind of looking at me because I started crying. And he was like, what's going on?
It was just, you were just being trendy.
Yeah. I was just being trendy. No, I was reduced to tears because, oh my God, somebody said my name right, but they got my gender wrong because I sound like a woman still, even though I know what data they were pulling from, and it says that I'm a man on there. And it was just, oh God, I was crying in front of all of these people.
I'm really sorry.
You should have just looked at the facts, and then everything would have been okay.
I can't fucking stand people who can't relate to something because they haven't felt it themselves, telling other people how to fucking feel. It's so fucking annoying. It's like, I mean, in my depression video talking about having depression, like when people come up to you and they're all like, oh, you're in one of your low moods, aren't you? Like, oh, he's just having like, it's like they treat you like you're strange, and you're like, no, this is just me. Like sometimes I get in this state, and it's horrible being treated like there's something wrong with you, and I think that can be extrapolated to trans people and other people. Can't you just fucking understand that they're human beings who have fucking emotions and feelings that you can't relate to? So like Michael said, who the fuck are you to tell them how to feel?
Can I
fucking
tell a more positive story? Can I tell a more positive story? And that's okay.
I'm just gonna Hulk the fuck out if I keep talking.
I have a colleague who's transitioning to man, and I'd seen him around the building, but only from a distance, like to say hi. So it'd been a couple months since we'd had a conversation, and we stopped to talk, and he spoke, and his voice had been lowered because he'd been taking testosterone with his transition, and I got like really excited, but I wasn't sure if I should comment on it. And then I went away and I thought about it, and I thought, no, that's something he'd really probably like to hear someone else be excited about. And so the next time I saw him, I made a point of going over and having a chat and just saying, can I just say your voice sounds great? I noticed it the other day and I wasn't sure, and then I just wanted to make sure that I said that you sound great. And he got a big smile and said that he had actually done recordings of his voice before the treatment started and then during the treatments, and he plays his oldest dated voice tapes back now, or files back. He's like, oh my gosh, is that what I sounded like? And so there are ways that you can be a friend and an ally and just be happy for someone when things are going well for them, and give them a hug or send them a hug when things are going badly. It's just it's like everybody else with stuff in their life. I don't see why it's so different. So
but it could be tricky too, though, because you never really know where someone is at when you make a comment, so it's good they took that a good way. But
yeah, because I know him, and also I think I'll err on the side of being happy for someone, and if they're not happy with it, well, I made the effort.
Yeah, I do want to actually touch on something that Tim had mentioned with the depression, because I've been dealing with mental health issues for pretty much since I was little, is I get told the same thing with my mental health issues that I get told with being trans, is get over it, or you're making other people uncomfortable. Can you just not show that? And that's actually, I actually got told, please don't tell people you're trans. It makes them uncomfortable, in the same way as please don't look depressed. It makes people uncomfortable. I was like,
well, also people walking on eggshells around you, like, you're like in a kind of depressed mood, and then someone's like, like, so, yeah, like, how are you?
I'm back.
Okay. All right.
And they don't know how to deal with you, Whereas, as Christy was saying, just talk to people like they're human beings. Just treat them like people.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, what's up?
Can I read
How's
a
it
comment
going?
on that note? Can I read a comment that I
Sure.
got on? Okay, I think this is the one. The real scientifically proven genders are male, female, intersex, and maybe agendered. Transsexuals are still either male or female, so transsexuality isn't a gender. All other genders are made up and don't exist. You're a he, a she, or an it. End of story. And it doesn't matter if you offend people. If you don't need to correct yourself, you don't need to correct yourself if you offend people. If facts offend someone, it doesn't matter, and it is their problem. Being right is all that matters, and you should only correct yourself when you are factually wrong. If people ignore facts and pretending factually correct information because it was inconvenient, or some people didn't like it because they found it offensive, then bury their heads in the sand, society would have never progressed.
It's a binary of 4.
Humanism.
The thing is, this is a social construction, just as much as gender is a social construction. They're socially constructing gender as only masculine and feminine, man, woman, and that's being like, it's not a spectrum, it's just binaries. You know, you're one or the other. You just flip a switch, and that's
Also
not based in
conflating gender and
facts.
sex.
Yeah, also, yeah. But
Yeah.
you know, the citation needed for that medical idea that there are only male and female. I'd like to see the citation on that. And
I
I
just
think
think
that
that
brings
that
us on to
Binary
sort of,
thing, but we're moving on, maybe, right?